Hey everyone, welcome to Primo NUTMEG. I'm your host, Steve. On today's show, I have Mises Institute Senior Fellow and Harold E. Wirth Eminent Scholar in Economics at Loyola University in New Orleans, Walter Block. Beyond being a childhood friend of Bernie Sanders, Dr. Block also has a PhD in economics from Columbia University. He is also the author of over 500 scholarly articles, and he's also the author of a famous 1976 book, Defending the Undefendable. On the show today, I will ask Dr. Block about his free market economic views, as well as his support for Donald Trump, thoughts on highway privatization, his call for open borders, and his solution to the abortion debate, which he calls evictionism. If you enjoy this interview, please subscribe to Primo NUTMEG on iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud, and check out previous episodes featuring Mises Institute Senior Fellow Mark Thornton, Foundation for Economic Education President Lawrence Reed, John McAfee, Adam Kokesh, Libertarian National Committee Chairman Wes Benedict, and many others. Also, please do check out our new website, primonutmeg.com. There you will see news articles, video, and links to previous podcast episodes. You'll also see links to our social media, so please do like Primo NUTMEG on Facebook and follow Primo NUTMEG on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this interview with Walter Block. Dr. Walter Block, welcome to Primo NUTMEG.
Thanks for having me with you.
Now, you have a very distinguished career, but I would actually like to start with a little piece of trivia that's become more interesting in the past couple of years, that you actually went to high school with Bernie Sanders, and I believe also the first year of college as well, and you guys were on a track team together. So my first question has to be, how well did you know Bernie Sanders back in high school, and do you have any funny memories of him back then?
Well, I knew him reasonably well. Not only were we on the same track team and were we in the same classes, but we also ran the same events, half mile and up, and he was one of the best runners in the city. I was mediocre, so I'd see the rear end of him disappearing in the distance. And also, we lived not too far from each other in the same quadrant away from high school, so sometimes we'd walk to school together or from school. We weren't really good friends. I've never been to his house, nor he to mine. But, we sort of kept in touch with each other every 5 or 10 years when we were adults. So, I don't know. I sort of knew him pretty well, and we weren't friends, but we were maybe more than just acquaintances, somewhere halfway between. And my recollections of him was he was very charismatic. He was like the center of attention of everybody. He was the captain of the track team, and he was running for president of Madison High School, and he and I had the same views, only I changed, he didn't. But he was a very nice guy. I liked him. He was one of the good people.
When's the last time that you spoke with him?
Well, maybe 5 years ago.
Really?
I don't think we spoke, but we emailed. I forget whether we spoke or emailed. Every 5 or 10 years for, I don't know, the last 30, 40 years, we've been in touch.
Do you guys ever discuss economics or politics at all?
Well, we agreed that we diverge in our views.
Yeah,
I think
I would say so.
I think the last thing he said was, yes, we have very different views on political economy. Several people have asked him if he wanted to debate me or was willing to debate me. They asked me first, and I said, oh, yes. But he's been a little bit busy this last year or two. So if we have a debate, it will be maybe in a year or two from now.
Well, that would be very interesting. I think that would probably be one of the most interesting debates I've ever seen, honestly, if I were to see that. But let's get to your own personal philosophy. You are a supporter of free markets. You are a libertarian. Why did you take such a divergent course in your own philosophy from Bernie Sanders?
Well, because it's true. Because free enterprise is the best thing since sliced bread and probably responsible for sliced bread. I don't know. that's one way to answer it. The other way is historically, who changed my mind. Which question are you asking?
Well, yes, I guess historically, I have heard that one thing that kind of changed your mind or developed your thinking was when Ayn Rand came to your school.
Yes, absolutely. She was the person, along with Nathaniel Branden, who converted me to the one true faith of free enterprise. Yes.
So, how well did you know Ayn? Did you speak with her a few times?
Oh yeah, I've been to her apartment, and I came to Nathaniel Branden's apartment, and she was there along with Leonard Peikoff and Alan Greenspan and a few of the other uh, people associated with objectivism in Ayn Rand. I knew Bernie Sanders better than Ayn Rand, but I did know her, and we were friendly. And as I say, she converted me to free market position, and so I'm very grateful to her, even though I don't fully agree with her on everything either.
So, at what point did you meet Murray Rothbard?
Well, what happened was I got converted by Ayn Rand, and then I went to the Nathaniel Branden Institute gatherings, and I was sort of put off by them because if you asked either of them a good, nice softball question, they would be very polite and they would answer you. But if you asked them a tough question or challenged them in any way, they would kick you out of the kick you out of the hall, which was sort of off-putting. On the other hand, I didn't know any other free enterprise people, so I had sort of this schizophrenic approach avoidance thing for about 2-3 years, where I'd go there and then I'd be turned off, and then I'd leave for 3 months, but then I knew no other people, so I'd sort of go back to it and then away from it. And then I was a student at Columbia University, and Larry Moss, who passed away all too early, and he was a fellow student of mine, and his roommate Jerry Wallows ganged up on me and said, "You must meet this guy Murray Rothbard. He's an anarchist." But I was, a Randite then, and anarchism was, a very bad thing. So I didn't want to meet Murray. But finally, they ganged up on me, and I agreed to meet Murray Rothbard, and he converted me to free market anarchism in about 10 minutes. So that's how I met him, maybe in 1966, and I met Ayn Rand in maybe 1962, 1963, somewhere in there.
Now, you call yourself an anarchist, but you did actually support Donald Trump in the most recent presidential election, which I think threw a lot of people off because you wouldn't think that, a anarcho-capitalist would be supporting the Republican Party nominee. And I think that you have explained a little bit why you did that. You actually had a very similar explanation to Noam Chomsky, who's been on this program. When he was on this program, he was saying sort of the opposite thing from what you were saying, that Hillary Clinton is marginally better than Donald Trump, so people should support her in swing states, but in safe states, vote for Jill Stein. You kind of said the reverse thing with Donald Trump and Gary Johnson. So what I'd like to ask you is, Donald Trump has been in office for 2 months now. How would you evaluate his presidency so far?
Well, to answer your question, your first question, I'll answer it with a joke. An economist was asked, "How is your wife?" And his answer was, "Compared to what?" So why did I support Donald Trump? Because he was way better than Hillary Clinton. Hillary was horrible. I mean, she was a big warmonger. At least Donald said he can get along with Putin, and we never should have done anything in Libya or Iraq or anything like that. So that's why I supported him. By the way, I supported Bernie vis-a-vis Hillary because Bernie and Hillary, probably Hillary's slightly better than Bernie on economics, but on foreign policy, Bernie was pretty libertarian, pretty Ron Paul-ite. Okay, so how do I assess Donald now? Well, C plus, B minus, I don't know, C minus. I'm not sure. Not too good. He's still with this thing about protectionism, which I certainly oppose. I'm a free trader. Although I'm not so unhappy that he got out of the Pacific, what do you call it, IPP, because I favor
TPP.
full free. I'm sorry.
TPP.
Right. Sorry. Thank you. I'm not a big fan of these NAFTA, CAFTA kinds of things. I just favor unilateral declaration of free trade with everyone, whether or not they reciprocate with free trade for our goods. So on that, he's not too good, although I'm ambivalent about him getting out of that Pacific agreement. He hasn't pulled any troops back. He's adding troops to various places. I'm a Ron Paul fan, and Ron Paul, if I could put words in his mouth, favors a very strong Coast Guard. Namely, nobody messes with us, but we're not exporting democracy, and we don't have any soldiers in South Korea or Japan or Germany or pretty much anywhere. All the troops come home and just protect the country. So we have a strong military, but the military is defensive, not offensive, and Donald hasn't done much in that regard, so I'm not a big fan of his on foreign policy. On the other hand, he hasn't invaded any new countries, although he sort of put a few more troops in Syria, which I didn't much like. And I'm very happy with him about this idea of what was it? For every new regulation, we got to get rid of two regulations. Also, I think his Supreme Court nominee Gorsuch, if I'm pronouncing that correct, is as good as we can get. Although I favored Andrew Napolitano, but Andrew supported Gorsuch, so I support that. So I think he's done well on that. To summarize, it's sort of a mixed bag. Some good things, some bad things. Oh, that thing about Berkeley, when Milo Yiannopoulos was booted out of Berkeley, Donald said something very charming. He said, maybe we shouldn't be sending Berkeley so much money. I thought that was marvelous. He didn't follow up with Charles Murray having his problems in Middlebury in Vermont or Connecticut, somewhere up there. But I'm a big fan of free speech and an opponent of these lefty fascists who won't allow free market or libertarian speakers to speak.
Now, one reason I think a lot of people might be surprised by the fact that you sort of support Donald Trump is that you say that you support open borders. Now, I've also heard you say that you support privatizing borders. So how exactly does that work? What does that mean? Does the country just let everyone in, or should it be selling off the land at the borders? What exactly are you advocating?
Well, Milton Friedman once said you can't have open borders and welfare, and therefore you shouldn't have open borders. I would say you can't have open borders and welfare, therefore get rid of welfare. I'm a libertarian, and the essence of libertarianism is the non-aggression principle. And I ask myself, suppose somebody came from Mars, forget about any other country, just to distance ourselves from it. This guy came from Mars, and he started homesteading in the middle of Alaska or in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, maybe in Wyoming. And this is land that is virgin land. It's never been touched by human beings. The BLM, Bureau of Land Management, claims ownership of it, but we libertarians don't accept that because we believe in the Lockean, Rothbardian homesteading theory of private property. And in order for virgin territory, untouched land, to fall under some ownership, you have to mix your labor with the land, and nobody's done that. So anyway, there's this Martian, and he's knocking down a tree and putting in a corn plant. And did he violate libertarian principles? No. So any ICE person, I forget what ICE stands for, the Border Patrol types, who come up to him and kick him out of the country or in any way molest him, they're violating libertarian principle. So I favor open borders, at least for virgin territory, of which there's plenty around. I mean, the BLM owns, I don't know, half of all the land west of Mississippi and 90% of Alaska, and it owns it unjustifiably. So I think that a person who violates the law against coming into this country without a permit is a good guy, is not violating rights, and the Border Patrol that stops him are in the wrong. Okay, so that's one point. The second point is, but do we really want 10 trillion Martians to come into the United States? No, we don't want 10 trillion. Two or three, 100 or so, that would be fine. But we don't want 10 trillion Martians coming here, even if they're good guys. And I'm assuming that they're not rape refugees like those people who come from the Arab countries to Sweden and Germany and start raping women. I mean, that's horrible. So how do we have our cake and eat it? How can we uphold libertarian principle and also not be victimized by Martian rape refugees or just nice guy Martians? We don't want a trillion of them. Well, my answer is let's privatize all the land. And if all the land was privatized, then we could say, well, these guys are trespassers. In other words, the whole point of protecting the Martian is he was homesteading virgin land, but there's no more virgin land because every square inch of it is now homesteaded by somebody. And if any Martian dares come in, he's a trespasser, and we kick him out, not so much because of open borders, but because of trespass. Trespass is a violation of property rights and a violation of libertarian principle. So that's how I hope to have my cake and eat it. On the one hand, uphold libertarian principle, and on the other hand, not be inundated by a trillion Martians.
So, something that you might be a little interested by, yesterday here in Connecticut, the state highways were shut down. All the state highways in the entire state of Connecticut were shut down for several hours. And if you were caught driving on the highways because of the snowstorm, police could issue you a $92 ticket. So you are an advocate of highway privatization. And again, when we had Noam Chomsky on the show, that was something that he was really horrified by about Murray Rothbard's philosophy that you could privatize the roads. So in a practical sense, how could you privatize the roads? And why would you even want to do that?
Well, the reason I'd want to do it is, do you know how many people die on those highways? It's something like 35,000 a year. 35,000 people every year die on those highways. They're a charnel house. They're horrible. I mean, 9/11, only 3,000 people died. In Katrina, only 1,900 people died. Now, look, I'm not making light of Katrina and 9/11, but just put this in perspective. 35,000 people a year die on those government highways, and nobody says squat. Well, I tell you, I don't like the idea of 35,000 people dying. And I don't think it's due to speeding and vehicle malfunction and driver inattention and drunken driving and all that stuff. I think it's due to the fact that the manager of the road, namely the government, can't manage its way out of a paper bag. Now, look, I'm a big believer in competition. I believe the reason we have reasonably good shoes, reasonably good burgers, reasonably good violins, reasonably good motorcycles is because of competition. If somebody can't produce a good item or a good service, they lose money. If they lose enough money, they go broke. And the reason we have pretty good pens and pencils and cars and shoes and stuff like that is because of competition. Well, why don't we have competition with roads? If I own one road and you own another road, and on my road a lot of people die, and on your road nobody dies because you're a better manager, well then I'm going to lose customers, you're going to gain customers. Eventually you're going to be able to outcompete me, and we'll save lives in that way. So I don't know, is Chomsky a supporter of death? I don't think so. I just think he doesn't understand economics. He doesn't understand competition. By the way, if you could hook me up with him to debate him on economics, not foreign policy because I agree with him there, but on economics. So look, right now, the rules of the road come from on high. Washington, D.C. delivers all the rules of the road for everybody, and we can't experiment like in the I-10, which runs by me, and I guess it's the I-95 that runs near you, or the I-90 in Connecticut. 95, and I think also 90 goes east to west, somewhere near Connecticut. And the minimum speed is 40, and the maximum speed is 70. Is that the best rules of the road? Maybe what we should have, I speculate, is the left lane, everybody has to do 75, the middle lane, everyone's 65, and the right lane, every 55. Would that improve things? Would that reduce deaths? I don't know, but it's plausible. And if you did that on your road, whereas on my road I did 80, 70, 60, we'd find out. But right now we can't find out because there's no possible experiment. There's no possible changing the rules of the road. And on my road, if I caught you drunken driving, I'd cut your nose off or something like that. And on your road, you'd deal with drunken drivers in a different way. The point is, the reason we have pretty good restaurants, the reason McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's are pretty good is they outcompeted other fast food places. Well, why shouldn't we apply this to the roads?
Now, you pretty much universally advocate privatization, and I think that seems a little horrific to some people. In that world, would the oceans be privatized? Would the air be privatized? What would that really look like?
Well, you didn't answer me about Noam Chomsky. You going to get me a debate with him or not? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I'll try.
Okay, you try. Well, it just so happens that I have 3 books in this series. The first book was Privatizing Roads. The second book was a thing called Water Capitalism, where my co-author and I did the roads by myself. It's called Water Capitalism, and we should privatize oceans, rivers, lakes, whatever. So yes, I favor privatizing everything. Not the air, because the air is not scarce. You can only privatize things that are scarce, and air is not scarce. Clean air, that's a different issue of pollution. Look, the reason that I wanted to privatize water, well, look, take Katrina. 1,900 people died in Katrina, and it wasn't really Katrina's fault. Katrina, I'm in New Orleans. Katrina missed us by about 40 miles or so. It was east of us, went by. It did a little damage here, but the real reason that we had so many people dying is because of the flood. The Mississippi River got uppity and flooded us. And why did it do that? Because the levees failed. And who made the levees? The Army Corps of Engineers. Now, that's not so bad from an economic point of view. I hate to be cruel and callous about it, but, people die. The problem from an economic point of view is those rascals are still in business. Can you imagine if McDonald's killed 1,900 people with a bad burger or whatever? They'd be out of business right away, and that's why we have pretty good burgers. But the Mississippi River is owned in effect by the government, and the Army Corps of Engineers is the manager of it, and it screwed up royally, and it paid no price. Let me read you my favorite quote from a hero of mine. His name is Thomas Sowell, and Thomas Sowell said, quote, "It is hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong." Well, the Army Corps of Engineers paid no price, and they were wrong. Now, if a private owner of the Mississippi River screwed up in this way, they'd lose money and they'd be broke, and somebody else would take over the Mississippi River, just as if McDonald's, God forbid, and I'm not impugning them, I'm a big fan of theirs, if they killed 1,900 people, I don't know, Wendy's or Burger King would take them over, and there'd be no more McDonald's. So that's one reason why I favor privatization of rivers. I know it sounds weird and it sounds ridiculous, and Chomsky's not going to like it because Chomsky's a commie. But I want to save lives. Don't we all want to save lives? And don't we realize that the competition of the marketplace is what gets us good wine and good soda and good books and good shoes and good everything else? Why can't we apply this to rivers, for God's sakes?
Now, you actually do apply your free market principles to the issue of abortion. And this issue is something that divides libertarians even. There are pro-life libertarians and there are pro-choice libertarians. Now, you have come up with something called evictionism. Can you explain exactly what that means?
You know what the problem with you is? You've done your homework. You know all of my views on everything. This is unfair. I'm kidding. To answer your question, yes, the libertarian movement is very, very divided. You have Ron Paul, who's pro-life, and you have Murray Rothbard, who's pro-choice, and you can't get 2 more highly credentialed or brilliant libertarians than them. So the libertarian movement, just like the general populace, is very divided on this issue. And happily, I've come up with a solution, and it's called evictionism. Now, you see, what abortion is really 2 things. One is evicting the fetus out of the womb, and the other is killing it. Whereas the pro-choice people want to be able to do both. They want to allow the woman to evict or separate the fetus from her, and also to kill it. Or kill him, I should say, kill him. It's a human being. I believe that a human life starts with a fertilized egg, because a sperm alone and an egg alone will not eventuate in the human being, but a fertilized egg will if it's put in the right environment, and we all have to be in the right environment or we all die. So the pro-choice people think that the woman has the right to kill the fetus and also to evict it. The pro-life people say, no, the woman has no right to evict or to kill. And I say the woman has a right to evict but not kill. Not kill because the essence of libertarianism is the non-aggression principle, and murder, along with rape and theft and arson, are the preeminent violations of libertarian theory. So there's no right to murder, but there is a right to evict. And it depends upon who is the property owner. Remember, we were talking about property when the Martian was homesteading land. Well, who owns the land here? Who owns the property in which the fetus is sitting? And it's the woman. So if the woman wants to evict, she should have a right to evict. Now, it just so happens with present medical technology, in the first 6 months or the first 2 trimesters, if she evicts, the baby will die. But she has a right to evict. On the other hand, in the 3rd trimester, she has also the right to evict, and then the fetus will stay alive. So if we adopt evictionism, rather than pro-life or pro-choice, at one fell swoop, we will safeguard all babies in the 3rd trimester, which I assume is 1/3 of babies. And as medical technology improves, maybe in 10, 20 years, it'll be the last 4 months and then the last 5 months that the baby will be viable outside the womb. By the way, do you know when the baby is viable, the fetus is viable in the Jewish tradition?
No.
It's when the fetus graduates medical school. That's a joke. That's a joke. I'm just kidding. So I think, to be more serious, that evictionism is a real compromise between the two. And I'm like Calhoun, the great compromiser, and I think that this is a way to bring us all together. Because I think, take the case of a baby, a fetus that is the result of rape. And now some young girl is walking down the street. She gets grabbed. She gets raped. She gets impregnated. You can't tell me that fetus is not a trespasser. It's a trespasser in her body. She doesn't want it in her body. So I think she has a right to evict it, but she has no right to kill it, because that baby is as innocent as any other baby. Yes, its father is an animal. Its father is a rapist, but the baby is innocent. So that fetus is a trespasser. The unwanted fetus is a trespasser. And from a libertarian point of view, even though it sounds a little callous, the owner of the property has a right to evict trespassers. If I invite you to my house for dinner, and we have dinner, and I say, oh, well, it's nice to have you for dinner, please leave. And you say, well, I like it here. I'm going to stay here for 9 months. I have a right to evict you. And if you're going to die because you're not in my house, tough on you. You have no right to be in my house. Now, obviously, I'm making an analogy between my house and the woman's body, but I think the analogy holds. So to summarize, evictionism is a very good principled compromise. If I say 2 + 2 is 4 and you say 2 + 2 is 6, a compromise would be 2 + 2 is 5. But that's an unprincipled compromise because, where did I get the idea that 2 + 2 is 5? But here it's a principled compromise because it upholds private property rights and trespass and human life.
But aren't there certain situations where you could evict someone from your property and you are violating the non-aggression principle? Say if you're in an airplane and you throw somebody out of your airplane, for example. I mean, aren't there certain situations when eviction could be wrong?
Yes, absolutely. If you agreed, if there's a contract, and I'm Air Canada or American Airlines or whatever, and I invite you to come on my plane, and now we're 30,000 feet up, and I say, okay, please leave. Well, no, there's a contract. And also, there are certain couples that are infertile, and what they'll do is they'll hire a host mother, and they'll pay her, they're not allowed to pay her because that's a whole other government regulation that should be abandoned, but they'll pay her $50,000. And now she's got their baby in her body, and she decides to evict them. No, 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 you can't evict because you are paid. You have a contract to keep that baby for 9 months. Then you can evict it regularly. It wouldn't be an eviction, but then you can give birth to that baby. So yes, that would be a counterexample. But if a woman gets raped, she has a right to evict. And suppose a woman has voluntary sexual intercourse. And now there's a trespass. She didn't agree to keep that baby for 9 months just because she had sexual intercourse. Yes, she invited the baby in some sense if she didn't use birth control, or even if she used birth control and the birth control didn't work, But just because you invite someone doesn't mean you invite them for 9 months. I invited you to my house for a dinner, and not for 9 months. So there is one exception, and that's the host mother.
So I know that we're running out of time here. I did just want to ask you one last question about the non-aggression principle and about free markets. It seems like there are certain points when a private entity, or at least a nominally private entity, colludes with the government and violates the non-aggression principle. Like, I think the Federal Reserve would be a good example of that. But you could also say that just being incorporated is getting certain government privileges, as are getting subsidies or, I don't know, possibly tax credits. So I guess that would be my question to you. When does a private business or even private individual collude with government and effectively violate the non-aggression principle?
Well, the Fed is a poor example. I don't consider that private. I consider that part of the government. A subsidy is certainly an improper thing, but a tax, what do you call it, tax credit, or, everyone, the churches have, what do they call it, tax, the churches don't have to pay taxes. Well, I think everyone shouldn't have to pay, I'm sorry?
A shelter?
Well, a tax shelter. Everyone should have a tax shelter, not just the churches. And the New York Times, I think, is a group that's in collusion with the government, part of the ruling class. They're just a mouthpiece for government. So now, with regard to just incorporation, I now start a shoe business with you, and we incorporate. That's not a special privilege from government. That's just, we're announcing, hey, look, if you want to sue us, you can only sue us to the extent of what we put into our shoe company that you and I started. On the other hand, if we run our shoe bus into somebody's house, then, we're responsible. But the point is, all we're doing is announcing to everyone that if you don't like our shoes, you can only sue us up to the amount of money we've got in the corporation, not for our private money. I don't think that's a special grant of privilege from the government. I think it's just an agreement. Namely, if you don't like dealing with our corporation, go elsewhere. Go to a private shoe company.
So do you think there is a definitive line that a company can cross where they start colluding with the government?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a red line. I would say there's a continuum problem. It's hard to say. You can't deduce everything from the libertarian non-aggression principle. You have to have private courts to determine these sorts of things. So yes, there are continuums all over the place, and certainly with regard to private entities colluding with government. So you'd have to take it on a case-by-case basis. I'd have to see some specifics, and even then I might be unsure because in gray areas there's no clear demarcation between guilt and innocence.
Well, Dr. Block, we are out of time, but where can listeners learn more about you and your work?
Well, I'm a professor of economics at Loyola University, New Orleans. You can Google me, Walter Block, and I've written a lot of stuff. So if you're interested in any of these things we've discussed, just Google me and Google the subject, or go to my web, walterblock.com.
Well, thank you, Dr. Block. I appreciate you being on the show today, and I will try to arrange that debate with Noam Chomsky. Falling short of that, maybe we could interview you in person next time I'm in New Orleans.
That sounds good. I really enjoyed this interview. You're one of the brightest interviewers, and you've done your homework more than most people. So it was a pleasure and a delight, and I'd be happy to be on your program again.
Thanks everybody for listening. I hope you did enjoy this edition of Primo Nutmeg. By the way, please do check out our new website, primonutmeg.com. There you'll see links to all of our social media, so please do like Primo Nutmeg on Facebook and follow Primo Nutmeg on Twitter and Instagram. And also subscribe to Primo Nutmeg on YouTube, iTunes, and SoundCloud. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.